already now people know the consequences of global warming, and they are doing
we tell people buy green cars, but we continue to create continue to create all these horrible problems with toxic waste.
You can approach someone and say, go and buy a green car. It isn't like good morning.
So you don't believe that people will be influenced if big multinational industrial corporations will in fact change their ways? You don't think people will be influenced?
I think the motion is about environment, not people.
But this, you mentioned the people. Okay, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, judges, observers. I'm here today to finish up the affirmative science speech and to provide what I feel is quite a clear picture as to why we have held the debate. I'd really like to address three key clash points, which I think demonstrate the way the debate has gone and show that it is coming in our favour today. First of all, I'll be looking at this issue of what we understand to be direct physical damage, because there's been some debate on this topic, even though they do reportedly agree with our definitions. Secondly, we'd like to look in depth at whether CEOs are to blame, the role they have in terms of taking responsibility for the actions of their company. And thirdly, looking at responsibility in a wider sphere, which has been touched upon many a time. Now, I'd like to turn first of all to this issue of what constitutes direct physical damage. Now, as I've said, the negative side, we're quite happy to accept our definition, but there does continue to be confusion. Now, we have had examples here of scale. There's been the issue of carbon. Now, we have, for instance, in cross-examinations, stressed that in a situation where for instance, we have acid rain, and we cannot attribute this necessarily to the actions of someone in Sweden, in China, in Botswana, anywhere, then clearly blame is not attributable, and the justice system cannot dish out blame. This is fair. This is how the entire justice system works. If there is evidence of somebody's negligence, then they are punished. Now here, there is no evidence. We cannot possibly find it, and so we cannot punish them. By contrast, they gave the example of the sulphur. If sulphur is pumped out, and our colleague responded to the issue of what if there's a local school. Now, yes, clearly it's going to have to be a case-by-case basis. But this really comes down to the understanding of justice. Now, the other team do seem some will be suggesting that justice is a black and white issue. Clearly, this is not how the justice system operates. Judges make, on a day-to-day basis, make judgment calls between two grey areas. They dish out variable fines to people who did nominally the same crime, based on the circumstances. They give them variable jail times based on, again, the severity of their negligence. For instance, given these examples, and I'd like to move on to this point to the issue of whether CEOs to blame. They've given these examples of a mudslide. Now, clearly, if this person has not done what he should do as a responsible corporate person, which is to tell his departments to provide him with reports as to their actions, he hasn't consulted with the right experts to see whether there would be a mudslide, he hasn't looked at the ramifications of his policy decisions, then yes, obviously the mudslide is his fault if it still happens. If it is a freak act of God, then clearly there's no blame lies there, and this isn't an issue. We're not blaming everyone for every act of God. That's clearly not the case. We're arguing for case by case. We must stress that. And this really is all about addressing the criteria. We're making it very clear, and they've agreed about criteria, that when you are negligent, you must take responsibility for your actions. When we can prove your negligence, then clearly you have got to pay. Now, they tried to suggest that really CEOs have no choice in the matter, and as such, we must take it out of their hands, say it's not their fault, and that, let them get on with what they're doing. But this is not the case. But they've admitted in cross-examination that there is a choice, but they're driven by petty, quite shallow profit in many ways. But there is a clear choice where they could have actually acted morally and responsibly, just as they claim people should do. They have stressed the need for people to act morally and responsibly, and we agree wholeheartedly. If someone does not, then they must be brought to task. That is what we have argued, and that is what they've really not addressed. Now, as such, I'd like to move on to my third clash point, the issue of responsibility in a wider sphere. We've talked about whether consumers or producers should really bear the burden of responsibility. Now, there's been a lot of, as we have mentioned, a lot of drives to ensure, to really encourage consumers to act ethically. Now, we want them to buy green cars, cars to waste less, and so on and so on. But we can't really do this in an environment where companies are not adhering to the same rules. We can't have this two-tier system, because much of consumer action is obviously entirely dependent on what the producers make available to them, how the producers act. They've tried to assert that if companies take these steps and start to behave responsibly, that this won't have an impact. But we clearly dispute this fact. If multinational companies are stepping forward and taking responsibilities, they are being adult and mature about their actions, then it's much easier for consumers to follow suit. As such, in that we have shown that CEOs really are to blame in a case-by-case scenario, that this is good for responsibility in the wider sphere, and as such that this really deals with the criteria of achieving justice and protecting these people who suffer through no fault of their own in these local communities. We beg you to support our position.
Okay, so I'm the final speaker in this debate. At first, I want to point out that the affirmative team made some really reasonable arguments, although as much as we agree on some points, we disagree on others. So basically, our main argument was that this law is too general to be applied to all the companies. So, because we all know that there's no company that only gives the product and not pollutes. So every company basically pollutes, and we see this law as a way of manipulation of those companies. Because basically, if you want to say something against that company, you can always say, oh, they were polluting and they weren't paying for it, basically because they were always polluting because everybody was polluting. And the law is too general for another reason, because this law would be good if all companies were the same, but the companies clearly are not the same. There are companies which are crucial for their communities, and yet if they cross the line, they have to pollute, and they're too small to pay. So basically, they will cut that company down, and the people who are dependent on that company will suffer, not just the company. So one of the main arguments of the affirmative team was that the CEO might be the responsible, but if you sue the CEO every time that a company makes pollution, it's not the right thing. They were not specific enough. I mean, they were specific in one thing, that the companies who do direct physical harm are the responsible ones, but if you have like a coal plant in a city that produces like 99.9% of the pollution, and some other company that's 300 kilometers away produces like this 0.1%, they cannot be sued because they are not entirely, because the sky is like polluted from all the sides, although it has like the biggest possible majority of pollution in that city. So what we're saying that the definition of affirmative team will allow companies that pollute less but are responsible for all the pollution to take the fault, and companies that are almost responsible fully but pollute much more are not really responsible for it. So basically, what we're saying is it's not democratic for asking companies that are small and they have to pollute, and rather for a greater thing not to pollute when some other companies go unpunished with it. And also we like to point out that some companies, the CEO is not the person who has all the authority. Some companies are really governmental companies. They have owners, they have partial owners which may be deliberately involved in pollution, but the CEO will be blamed again, and those people will go unpunished. So what we're saying, that this law might be applied, but has to be